Welcome back to another edition of Through the Smoke, a Miami Hurricanes football and recruiting podcast here on the 24/7 Sports Network. David Lake, joined as always by Gabby Urrutia. We're here to discuss the third official visit weekend coming up here in the summer. Miami's set to host 11 prospects this weekend as they start to build out their 2026 recruiting class. As we know, recruiting nowadays happens in the summer months, the vast majority of it, at least in terms of visits and locking down commitments. And we got some commitments to dive into here that happened this week. Before we do that, want to of course highlight two of our important sponsors. Of course, Canes Connection. That's Miami's collective. Go to canesconnection.com and support those guys as best you can. It's probably the best grassroots way to support the program by donating to the collective. They have various membership tiers. Choose the one that best suits you. You also get different perks depending on the membership tier you choose. So go to canesconnection.com. Also want to highlight our guy, Nick Musarino at the Musarino Law Group. If you've been injured in a car accident, call 561-960-9870 or visit the musarinolowgroup.com for your needs. Big time Miami Hurricanes fan. Would love to talk Canes with you too if you give them a call. So again, Nick Musarino at 561-960-9870. All right, Gabby, like I kind of said at the beginning here, Miami picked up two commitments here this week with their 2026 recruiting class. Both guys coming on the line of scrimmage. Both guys, um, both guys visited this weekend in offensive lineman Cannon Pickett and defensive tackle Tyler Bacon. Tell us just what you feel like Miami added to its class with these guys.
I think definitely just some beef along the line of scrimmage. We know that this is a line of scrimmage organization. Cannon Pickett is the sixth offensive lineman that Miami's taken this cycle, so I think it kind of tells you where their head is at as far as just what's a priority for the program. And he's a guy who has some mass and has some size and has a chance to develop into an interior. Whether it's guard or center type of guy down the line. He may need a few seasons to bake, but I think he's a good athlete for his size. And, I think he's just going to have to continue to work on a lot of like the technical things, but he's been well, versed in just this process. He's been really active on the 5-on-5 settings and all the camp settings. So we've had tons of exposures to Cannon Pickett, and you kind of have an idea of what Miami is getting there. And again, just a bigger body who plays
He
tackle at
cares. He
yeah,
cares
for
about
sure.
football too.
Absolutely, yeah. And he's a smart kid. Comes from a good family. The Pickett's are a really, really good family. Booker has been awesome for Miami. They're excited about him. Cannon's going to come in and do all of the right things and put his head down and grind and work and develop and, do all the things that he needs to do to eventually get to the place that he needs to be at. So this is a quality addition for Miami along the offensive line. On the flip side, Tyson Bacon, a kid from Hoover, Alabama, plays at Hoover, Alabama. I think he's originally from the Midwest, but nonetheless, get a guy from the state of Alabama who trains alongside a lot of the best defensive linemen in the state. Guys like Fodden Cleveland, who's one of the top uncommitted defensive linemen in the country. Kamarian Young, who's committed to Alabama with Coach L there at Step by Step Training. He does an excellent job with guys. Has a long history of track record of guys he's trained at the next level. So this is a guy who's pushing 6'4" in that 270-pound range, heavy-handed. Miami likes him as the start to their defensive line class. I think that they're still shooting for the stars. There's still a lot of quality talent and high-level talent, high-impact guys that Miami would still like to add to the class. But I think Tyson Bacon is a really, really good addition, especially if you walk out of the summer or out of the cycle with Tyson Bacon as like your third defensive tackle. I think that that's a huge, huge win. But he's a really good player, and that offer sheet tells you everything you need to know. He had Ohio State on him. He was going to go to Alabama. He visited Georgia. He visited Florida officially. So this is a guy that the SEC and the top end of the Big Ten wanted, and Miami was able to get it done. So I think that this is a really, really quality addition for the Hurricanes.
Third defensive tackles matter big time as it relates to putting together a roster that can navigate a season because you need five defensive tackles to successfully navigate a season with the wear and tear of a season and the depth that's required during the course of a game too. So adding a player like a Tyson Bacon is a big deal. Uh, let's go big picture and let's kind of just talk about where this class stands. So Miami's now at 13 commits in the 2026 class. It ranks eighth according to 24/7 Sports. As it relates to like ACC teams, Clemson's still at the top. They got off to a fast start. They are fourth in the country with 18 commits. SMU is 11th in the country with their class. That's kind of the top classes as it relates to like being top 15, which that's, to me, that's where recruiting classes matter. Top 15. I think there's still a big leap between top 15 and top 10. And I think there's an even bigger leap between top 10 and top five. Uh, but anyways, top 15 is all you got to really talk about. If you're not top 15, you're not really recruiting at
Right.
that high of a level.
For
So
sure.
anyways, Miami's 2026 recruiting class. What are your thoughts, just big picture wise, on where things stand right now? And there's a long way to go with filling this thing out. But do you like where, things are right now in the middle of the summer?
I do. I really do. I mean, it starts at the top, with
Yeah,
Jackson Catwell. He's the number one overall player in the country according to the industry generated 24/7 sports composite. So I think whenever you can kind of dip your toes into those waters and come out on top of one of those recruitments, you have to feel good about the way that the class is shaping up. And then behind him, again, I think there's just a lot of quality. I think especially at the line of scrimmage, I'm really excited about this offensive line class between Cantwell and Joel Irvin, who has like what an 85-inch wingspan at six
yeah.
foot six, 340 pounds. I think he's again a 3 star. Not saying 3 stars are bad players, but 3 star according to the industry. But I think he's someone who is going to continue to surge, and I think as more people get eyes and exposures to Joel Irvin, his stock is only going to continue to rise because he is a mountain of a human. And then you got Ben Cogden, who's a 6'7", 285-pounder, a top wrestler, all those things. Like I think what Miami's done along the offensive line has been quality. And you mix in, some of the in-state guys and JJ Sparks and Reese Woodrow, Cannon Pickett. I think that there's size, right? Like this is not a small group of guys. JJ Sparks is 6'4", 300. Reese Woodrow 6'3" and a half, 310. Cannon Pickett 6'4", 320. I mean, these are all big, big, large humans, and I think that
Let
that
me ask you
matters.
this. Do you have an idea like how big of an O-line class they want?
I think seven would be
Okay.
ideal. Brett Koleje, the
Right.
IMG Academy offensive lineman, is still out there. There were questions just kind of coming in with 5 commits already. Would they take both Cannon Pickett and Brett Koleje this past weekend with both of them visiting? And a resounding yes. Like they would
Yeah.
absolutely take both of those guys. And, do they sign seven guys? I mean, I think who knows, maybe still to be
Yeah.
determined. But I think that Miami values each and every one of these guys in the class, and if they can top things off with Brett Koleje, internally that would be just a massive, massive, massive success because I mean, they're super high on Brett Koleje. He would be right up there with all the other guys, as far as like the Joe Irvins, Ben Cogden, Jackson Cantwell. Brett Koleje is a highly, highly coveted interior lineman. So if Miami's able to beat Georgia for him, which I think is on the table, I think that that would be, a quality seventh. I don't think they would take a seventh just to take a seventh. I think if it's
Right.
it's either Brett Koleje or they're rolling with six. So
I think too, like it's hard to convince, some of the sixth or the seventh offensive linemen of that group to sign with a 7-man
right,
offensive line class for their just as they evaluate what's best for their careers.
of
Because,
course,
you know, it doesn't make sense to do that, or does it make sense to go be the third or fourth offensive line commit of a different class? To me,
right,
that's where the challenge is,
yeah,
where Miami's going to have to recruit that if they want a bigger class, which going to 105, I think it does make sense to just bring in big or lots of numbers in offensive line classes.
yeah,
Anyways,
for
I
sure.
cut you. If you're looking at this class, Gabby, and just like, the visits that have happened through these first 3 weeks are going to happen through, this third week. If you're looking at one position group where you're like, okay, let's see if Miami can get some momentum at this position group in July, in August, when commitments really start happening. What position group would you highlight then?
Yeah, I think a couple come to mind. I think really just the defensive front comes to, I mean, you got Tyson Bacon on board, but I think that there's still a lot of meat left on the bone as far as just Miami's defensive line recruiting. There's not an edge rusher that's on board yet. You still got some guys that are going to come in and visit. Really, Tyson Bacon is the only defensive tackle locked in. I mean, Miami has big plans along the defensive tackle. So I think as the way we're talking about the offensive line and how important it is, especially for the 105 in this next era of college football, I think the defensive line is equally as
Yeah,
important as far as just continuing to be,
numbers.
and establish yourself as a line of scrimmage program and having the quality bodies to be able to rotate and move guys around. I mean, yeah, we go into every portal season and we're just like, hey, it'd be awesome if we
A
found
fourth D
yeah,
tackle, or
exactly, a
yeah,
fourth D tackle. It'd just be nice if
which might
that's
still happen, but if you
right
could
for sure.
still just recruit that, that's ideal.
A
You
hundred
know what I mean?
percent. 100%. And so I think the defensive line recruiting is pretty interesting to me. I feel like there's a lot of different ways that this can kind of end up going. So I'm curious to see which way it goes. I think defensive line recruiting, I think wide receiver too. There's a lot of
Yeah.
to me, there's some fogginess. I think there's starting to become some clarity as far as just like, all right, who are the true priorities versus who are the guys that they're, continuing to evaluate or keeping warm or whatever the case is. And I think a few of those guys that they are prioritizing we'll talk about later in this podcast.
Right.
But I think those are a few that I'm just like, hey, let's kind of see what happens here.
All right, let's dive into this weekend's official visitors. Let's start just like we did last week at the top with Miami commits. Miami's got a couple guys planning to visit this weekend on the offensive line, and Reese Woodrow and JJ Sparks, both three-star guys. Reese from the Orlando area, JJ from the Jacksonville area. Is this just one of those check the box, make sure you lock these guys down type of visits with these guys?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think these guys have taken any other visits, so I think that this is just getting these guys back around, seeing where things are at. I think it will be interesting to kind of take the temp on both of these guys. They both seem locked in. They both had other options. I think they both probably knew what the deal was. I do think as
They're
late.
similar players, which
Right,
is
for sure.
interesting.
Yeah, I think they both have kind of center projections. I would say,
Yeah,
would you? I don't know if you would say that
I
too,
would
David.
agree.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that maybe like a Reese Woodrow maybe has more guardy type of stuff. I don't know. I'm not like the offensive line expert or anything, but they think he can play a guard potentially. So yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens with those guys, but I know Miami values both of them. Miami
Yeah.
wants to recruit a true center every cycle. I think they feel like they got, honestly, I think they have three guys who could potentially snap it in this class now. So I think that there's value to that as you kind of just sort through all of this because you need to establish who your center of the future is going to be. They have SJ Alafai-Tuli. I think you could feel good about that, but there's still some development that needs to go on there. So I think you constantly need to be recruiting true centers, and I think that's something that Miami's kind of thinking about too, like guys who have actually snapped,
Right.
guys that have done it before. I think both those guys, Reese Woodrow and JJ Sparks, have both snapped. I think there's value to that, and that's why I could see Miami ultimately crossing the finish line with those guys because I think that that's pretty unique, at the high school level to find quality guys who can do that. Um, but yeah, we'll see what happens. Just as far as just what else is with is coming up with these guys after this visit. If there's any other schools they're going to kind of continue to explore.
All right, let's move on to some of the uncommitted guys or guys not committed to Miami that are expected to visit. Let's start with five-star wide receiver Calvin Russell, the local five-star, number 21 overall in the country, according to 24/7 Sports, 6'5", 195 out of Miami Northwestern. Also a very good basketball player. I think he could play in college if he wanted to. I think his future's best in football. But this just gives the idea of the type of athlete he is, and also too to me, like, I mean, we can get into this later, but when you talk about Calvin, I think you talk about a lot of upside you're projecting
Right.
because of this athleticism and what he can be, because he's just kind of scratching the surface still of the player he is now. He's visited Florida, LSU, and Oregon. He's expected to visit FSU maybe after Miami, and he's going to make his commitment on July 5th. Gabby, you've kind of been all over this recruitment here the last week or two, and I don't know, maybe I'm speaking out of turn here, but it just seems like from a Miami and Calvin Russell standpoint, there's just something off. I don't know if I'm
Yeah.
speaking out of turn there. Do you get the same vibe? We haven't spoken about this. Uh, you and I personally, but it just feels that way to me, where it's like
Right.
something's just not quite connecting. And that's maybe where this weekend's important to kind of get on the same page with Miami making it clear, hey, we really want you, and Calvin understanding where he stands with Miami.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't push back on that. I think that there's a lot of truth to that, where it's just like a lot of uncertainty. And look, I think that this is a recruitment that's been kind of all over the place, and it's been hard to pin down. Like if you were like, where's Calvin Russell going? I think that's the question everyone's asking. Like, what's he actually trying to do? There's been some Syracuse buzz. He went out to
Right.
Oregon and LSU, and there's Florida, and you got Michigan, and he could play basketball at Michigan because I guess Dusty May offered him a scholarship up in Ann Arbor, and is North Carolina in the mix? Fram Brown and that factory. There's a lot of moving pieces in this recruitment, but I think as we head into the weekend, David, just where I think things currently stand as we're kind of walking into this weekend, this is the time where I think Miami plans to really just make an aggressive run at Calvin Russell. I think that they're going to make it known and clear that he is a priority. I think that they're going to, put themselves in a competitive situation to just show Calvin that this is a place that he can stay, that he could stay home. He can do everything he wants to do here at the college level, whether it's play basketball. He has an offer from Jay Lucas's staff to go over there. That staff is all in on bringing him in and seeing if he can compete and play with this guys. Perfect timing because it's a new staff and there's transitioning and
Right.
there's roster spots and even if he kind of Keon Coleman's it for a year where you get a couple minutes here or there and kind of get that you kind of get that fix of the college basketball life before maybe fully focusing on football because if we're being real, not many guys do both
It's
long
just hard
term.
to do.
It's just
Yeah.
yeah, scheduling wise, it's tough to commit to both, but maybe early on in your career you can do that. Um, but yeah, I think that this is going to be an extremely important weekend for Miami and Calvin Russell. And my understanding, again, walking into this is that Miami is going to be aggressive here. They're going to make their run. They're going to make their push. And again, this is a local program. His mom's name is hanging in
Right.
the rafters at the Watsco Center as a women's basketball Hall of Famer. So this is a situation that we've always kind of thought if Miami makes their run, if Miami makes that push, are they just going to be able to get him? Are they going to be able to keep him home? And I think we'll have a lot more clarity on that walking out of the weekend.
And this is an obvious thing to say, but to me, this is a player Miami can't let leave. We talk about just local 5 stars. You can't let those guys leave in general. He's a local 5-star wide receiver. And, Miami hasn't necessarily been able to land the elite of the elite wide receivers that they've wanted to land during this Mario Cristobal era. This is the type of guy that can change that, both from a narrative perspective and just from a result perspective of like, okay, you went out and did it. To me, like, I don't know if you agree with this, Gabby, but as a player, to me, I think he's kind of like similar, like to me, like a Josh Moore type of trajectory. I'm not saying they're similar players, but trajectory wise, in terms of like timeline to playing at the college level, I think both those guys are very talented, high upside, big bodied receivers. I think they both probably ideally need a year of, development at the college level before you really see their talent on the field. And in the case of like a Calvin specifically, I think the upside is definitely 5-star with his size. Like one thing you look at when you see him now, like it's clear, and I don't think this is a bad thing. I'm not saying this as a bad thing. I feel like this is a good thing. You could tell he's playing other sports because his body isn't necessarily built up the way guys who have only focused on football is built up,
Right.
just from a strength standpoint. Um, but he goes out and he balls, and you can see the frame is there once he dedicates himself to a full-time college strength and conditioning program. His body's going to fill out fine. Um, but he's just a guy with a ton of upside. And to me, there's 3 local guys I would highlight as like, okay, you can't let these 3 guys leave. Russell, Derek Cooper, James Johnson. There's probably others too, but for me, that's the top 3 where I would be like, okay, these 3 guys have to be Miami Hurricanes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you, especially with Calvin, and he's kind of light, like he
Yeah.
hasn't really been built up, and you wonder what it's gonna look like when he kind of starts adding the mass, and he looks that
But
light,
he's
and he's
so
still
smooth. Like
right.
He gets open
for
easily
sure.
as a 6'5" guy.
Yeah.
His movement skills are rare.
Yeah, and he's already like if assuming that this is correct, which I don't know why it wouldn't be, 195 pounds. So he's like not small,
Yeah,
but
he's
like,
6'5". I mean,
he's
he's
yeah,
tall. So,
exactly. So, but like he already has like it's not like he's 6'5", 175
right,
pounds, and he's like a rail.
right.
I think he's got some potential to add mass to that frame, and you wonder what it's going to look like over spring, and once he kind of again fully focuses on it, and if that frame is going to like how quickly is that frame going to be able to add mass? Because if you think about Calvin Russell at 200 and maybe 15, 210, 215 pounds maybe down the line, like that's
Yeah.
something that could potentially be big time where the 5 star it makes sense, it checks out, it hits, because if it all clicks, he's got sky high potential.
All right, let's move on to four-star tight end Israel Briggs. A lot of Miami buzz here. He's the number 70 overall player in the country, listed at 6'5", 200. To me, on tape, he looks a little bigger than that. To me, he looks like a 210, 220 type already. Redwood High School in California, has visited Cal and LSU, will visit Texas A&M. To me, when you watch his tape, Gabby, he's an exciting tight end to think about when you're projecting him. What does Miami think about him? What are Miami's chances here?
Yeah, this is a guy that Miami's prioritized for a long time. He got down in the fall months for a home game. He committed to Arizona State briefly, and then kind of went on a string of visits, which ultimately led to him and the program parting ways. But one of those trips was to Miami, so was down this spring also. And getting back now for an official visit, this is a guy that's been at the top of the priority list for Cody Woodle and the tight end guys. And I think that this is a really big weekend. Miami doesn't have a tight end committed yet. Last cycle they had two committed in the summer, weren't really sweating it, and now I think it's a really really big weekend for Israel Briggs. This is talk about kind of we talked about Hezi Ken as like the big inline tight end target. Israel Briggs alongside
Yeah,
Zach Turner are kind of like the two flexy guys that could be more of like the if you want to again
he's a
projecting
Will Mallory.
right, yeah, or like even
That's who
Miami
he is
terms.
to me.
For sure. He's a really good athlete, a super good athlete. And Miami went out to go watch him camp over the spring and walked away from that just feeling like just, really like just like smitten by the kid. Just really love what he brings to the table. They think he's probably the best pass catching tight end in the country, one of the best athletes at the position. So, yeah, I think Miami's in a really good spot. LSU, I think, is probably the biggest competition. Cal was in the mix there for a bit. They took two tight ends. I think that's dead. So I think LSU and Miami are kind of going head to head right now. I personally like where Miami stands in this recruitment going into the week, and we'll see if they can close coming out of it.
Athletic tight end, big frame, run after catch ability. That's what kind of stands out about him when you watch him, just his run after catch. He played some running back too on his tape, and just kind of highlights how well he moves for being a bigger running back in that situation. Really fluid mover. So he would be an excellent addition. Four-star wide receiver Zion Robinson, number 71 overall in the country, 6'3", 180, Mansfield High School in Texas, has visited Michigan, will visit Stanford, caught 42 passes for 527 yards and 8 touchdowns. What do we need to know here about this Texas wide receiver?
Yeah, high education kid, really values all
Yeah,
that stuff. I think TCU was in there. Was supposed to take a midweek TCU and then transition to Miami. Not sure what ended up happening there, but it seems like the TCU visit is off the 24/7 sports profile. So maybe just doing Miami this weekend. This is a big receiver who visited in the spring too. I think Miami's, continuing to kind of learn more about Zion Robinson. Again, he's from Texas, so not an area where Miami typically goes and ends up landing top 100 type of wide receivers. But I think that private school aspect and him just valuing the education of it so much, you see the three schools that are in it, and it all kind of makes sense between the Michigan, the Stanford, and Miami from that standpoint. So I'm curious what the vibe's going to be kind of coming out of the weekend. I think going into the week, there's three big receivers that are visiting
yeah,
on top of Israel Briggs, who's kind of almost borderline or
he
a
is.
receiver type of tight end. So really four of them. Zion Robinson's the one I'm probably least sure about as far as just like him landing at Miami, or Miami ending up being the spot. If there's some Michigan buzz there, truthfully, could see Stanford working out, but not sure exactly where Zion Robinson stands as far as Miami.
He's an interesting player too. Like I talked about Josh Moore from a trajectory standpoint with Calvin Russell, just like in terms of timeline and playing at the college level. To me, Zion is a similar player to Josh Moore. Just big frame, explosive athlete for being a bigger receiver, high upside guy. He's the type of receiver, like big receiver, which is rare. Like these are the guys you want at the college level. He's a yak threat as a big receiver because he is explosive and fast. You give him a quick pass, and he can go generate some yards after catch. And in college football, those guys are valuable. So he's an interesting player. All right, four-star running back Jay Lamar, number 161 overall player in the country, 6 foot 205 at a Colquitt County High School in Georgia. A cousin to Nye Carr, wide receiver, currently on Miami's roster. Jay Lamar has visited Auburn, Clemson, and FSU. Will visit Georgia after Miami. His commitment date right now is on June 25th. It seemed like Gabby, like back in January when he visited Miami, it seemed like this was going to be kind of a Miami and Georgia battle. Is that still the case? Have more teams entered the mix and are a threat with Jay Lamar? Where do you think he stands in general on with Miami and their running back board?
Yeah, I think that this is. Well, I think Jay Lamar really likes Miami. This is going to be his third different visit back. He visited in January, like you're alluding to. David was back again in the spring, and now comes back for his official visit. Definitely more suitors in contention other than Miami and Georgia. Clemson's in the mix.
Yeah,
Auburn, Florida State are also in the thick of things there. So I think this is one that's kind of always been leaning Georgia.
yeah,
He finishes off the summer there, but like you mentioned, there's some kind of family ties to Miami with Nye Carr. Miami's also done a pretty good job of acquiring some Colquitt County players, former players in Nye Carr and now Kamal Bonner, the
yeah.
transfer linebacker who they got from NC State, played at Colquitt
It's a
County too.
good
And
program
yeah,
in
for sure.
South Georgia.
Absolutely. And look, I mean, I think there's some familiarity there. The guys have transitioned to Miami well. Nikar, decided to stay with the program this offseason rather than leave, which was a nice development. And so I think that only keeps Miami in the game for Jay Lamar. And I think too, maybe the most notable thing with Jay Lamar is that Miami's running back commit Javian Mallory is scheduled to visit Alabama this weekend. So
Yeah,
I think internally you're viewing this Jay Lamar recruitment a little bit differently now because you kind of have to sweat out the fact that, hey, you know what? It's on the table that Javian Mallory does flip to Alabama. And if he does, where are you at? Because you would be left with no running back commits. You feel good about where things are at with Derek Cooper, but that's far from a sure thing with so many national programs still in contention. I think this Jay Lamar recruitment and this official visit, it might be one of the most intriguing, interesting storylines of the weekend just because of how Miami has to kind of view and approach
yeah,
this visit because of all the moving pieces and just because of the way that situation is kind of developing the running back board in general. They've kind of put all their chips to the middle of the table with Jay Lamar and Derek Cooper once they got Javian Mallory on board, but now with Mallory, I don't want to call it wavering, but looking around,
yeah.
you have to recruit Jay Lamar like he's a guy that you might need to acquire. So curious what the vibes are going to be coming out of that one.
What do you make of Mallory doing this? I mean, are you surprised? Is Miami surprised?
I don't know if I'm surprised. He said a lot of, I mean, he said Alabama's been doing a good job recruiting him, and then once he kind of set up that Alabama visit, he said a ton of schools started calling, and he said he wasn't trying to do all of that. I will say, I went to go see JV Mallory earlier this week. It seems like his whole school or like the football program was going up to Alabama for a camp. I'm not sure if
Yeah,
they're doing that because Javian was up there, or if they were already doing that, and maybe that opened the door to Javian Mallory taking that official visit. And I'm not saying that there's not legitimate interest in Alabama from his end or from their end, but I do think it kind of ended up being one of those situations where it was kind of convenient. Maybe he was going to be up there anyways if he was going up for a 7-on-7 with his team and decided to just, hey, you know what? Let me just OV these guys and maybe play with the boys on Sunday or some point this weekend, or maybe not, just hang out. But yeah, I think that it's something to watch. I think it's something to track. He talks about Kalen DeBoer taking a really active approach in his recruitment. They said they have a lot that they want to show him, and so look, I mean, this is Alabama at the end of the day,
yeah.
and
It's interesting to me, like Jay Lamar, or sorry, Javian Mallory is a good running back. To me, he's a good number two running back. It's just interesting that Alabama is pushing for it. That's
Yeah.
just my take.
I think similar to Miami, Alabama kind of views him as sort of like the running back too. I think what I hear, I'm not an Alabama reporter, but just what I've heard is that things are pretty okay there between Xavier Crowell and the he's well an in-state running back and the Crimson Tide. So maybe that's their lead back, and Javian Mallory could maybe be that number two back. So we'll see. Again, let's see how
Yeah.
this weekend plays out. Javian Mallory will be back in Miami next weekend for his official visit. So we'll definitely have some more answers, but it definitely, to me, changes the way that this Jay Lamar recruitment, and I think internally too, it changes the way that they're going about this Jay Lamar recruitment. If you're looking, they got to be looking. So I think it's just one of
Right.
those things.
All right, let's go on to four-star defensive back Cortez Redding, number 242 overall player in the country, 6 foot 175 out of Jonesboro, Georgia. Has visited NC State. His tape is fun, Gabby. He's kind of a fast, physical, aggressive safety. To me, he's kind of like an in-the-box safety that has the ability to play as a free safety at times. Honestly, when I was watching his tape, he kind of reminds me of like AJ Halsey, who was in the transfer portal, kind of the Houston defensive back that ended up transferring to LSU. Kind of similar way of playing. Halsey's, more of a thicker guy than Cortez Redding, but same playing style in terms of fast, physical, and aggressive. What can you tell us about this recruitment?
Yeah, definitely a safety option that Miami's exploring. Miami has a commitment from his teammate, Jontavius Wyman. So he's one of Miami's cornerback commits. And Cortez Redding is a guy that his visit schedule's moved around so much. He was originally going to visit the first weekend, got pushed to the 20th, and then now it ended up here being on the 13th. So again, I think I'm there's another one where not sure where things stand right now. I think NC State is the school that has a nice. I think that they're doing a good job here. I think Ole Miss too. If I were setting the odds, I would probably put Miami third of those three
Mm.
schools that he's visiting. We'll see what the vibes are coming out of the weekend, and I think it's mostly because there's another safety on the visit that I think Miami's kind of all in on, and gotta kind of wait and see where that one goes. I think before maybe you can transition over to Cortez Redding.
So let's discuss three-star DB Blake Stewart with an 89 grade, 6 foot 170 out of Woodward Academy in Atlanta, Georgia. Has visited Clemson and Vanderbilt. Will visit Michigan as well as Miami here. What do we need to know about Blake Stewart?
Yeah, I think this is a Miami Clemson battle. That's the way that I kind of read the situation, and I think it's encouraging that he did not commit to Clemson after that first official visit weekend, and is going to get back down to Miami for the third time. Took two different spring visits. Was at Miami's first spring practice back in March. Visited again in April. Now gets back for his OV. So I think that this is one that Miami would love to close on. This is a top priority safety target for the Hurricanes, and I think that this is a big weekend as far as just maybe crossing the finish line. I think Miami's in a really good position here, but they got to show him that this is a spot where he can be developed, and why basically Miami's a better fit than Clemson. So I think that's something that's on the table as far as potentially adding Blake Stewart. I know Zach Etheridge, Will Harris have done an excellent job of putting Miami in a really good position in this recruitment. So just got to see how they are able to close and if they're able to close.
I really enjoyed watching his tape. He's not like the biggest or the fastest defensive back, but he's always in a position to make plays. You can just tell he's a smart, instinctual player. And you win football games with guys like that on the back end because he can get guys lined up correctly. He's in the right spots. He can cover up mistakes because he does identify things quickly once the ball is snapped. I love the way he plays. To me, he's like a multi-year starter at the college level. I really like his tape. Is this testing going to blow you away? I don't know. I would assume not. But I think he's a big time, not big time. I think he's a good player. And I think he can be a multi-year starter at the college level. All right, let's go three-star wide receiver Tyron Evans, who is a Tennessee commit, 87 grade. Listed at 6'3". To me, he looks taller than that, but who
Yeah.
knows when you're watching on tape. But he's listed at 6'3", 185 at a Huff High School in Cornelius, North Carolina. He committed to Tennessee back in January. He has visited Kentucky and NC State. He will go visit Tennessee later this month. What do we need to know here with Tyron Evans?
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't push back on the fact that he might be taller than 6'3". I saw him on campus during in the spring, and he definitely looks like a big-bodied receiver. Miami loves this kid. They loved him back in the spring. I think coming out of the spring when he visited, there was some buzz that maybe Miami could potentially flip him from Tennessee. I think that was on the table. Things kind of fizzled out, and I think that there was a lot of just uncertainty about where things stood even a few weeks ago as we were kind of beginning the official visits, and I was kind of circling the wagon on Tyron Evans just because I knew how much they had liked him before, and there was a lot of uncertainty about whether he would be on campus this weekend or just in general this summer, and where things stood there. So I think the fact that he's back here is a good sign for Miami because I think this is someone that they've prioritized throughout the process. And NC State's gotten him on campus, Kentucky's gotten him on campus. I think Tennessee will close out the summer, see if they can hold on. But Miami's going to push here. I think that I haven't said that about a lot of receivers. Said it really, I think, for the first time about Calvin Russell, saying it again now about Tyron Evans. I think that this is a guy that Miami really likes. He was in my first mock class that I did for the for the cycle, just because again I think that was just where the buzz was as far as just where what Miami felt about the way Miami felt about him and where things kind of were. So we'll see if Miami can creep back into that territory, potentially pull him away from the Vols.
His tape is funny. He had 36 catches for 980 yards last season, 14 touchdowns. So that's an average of 27 yards per catch. And like if I'm going to compare him to a Miami player, just for the sake of this podcast, he reminds me a lot of Tommy Streeter, just a long, kind of a go route guy or a deep post type of guy that would really threaten and stretch a defense downfield. He just chews up yards with his stride and his long speed. So I think he could be a very good player at the college level with that ability. And honestly, like in that regard, his commitment to Tennessee in their offense and what they do makes a ton of sense. So, and Miami does similar things too to Tennessee with their air raid and the way they want to throw it deep too. So, Tyron Evans is an interesting player. All right, let's go to three-star cornerback. Is it Kosi Barnes? He's an
Yeah.
88 grade, 6'3", 190 at a Grimsley High School in Greensboro, North Carolina. He has visited Rutgers and South Carolina. Will visit Kentucky. Um, he's kind of like you watch his tape. He's your typical Gabby, like to me, long, rangy, boundary corner. Not the fastest accelerator. He wins with his length at the catch point. He's good at knocking the ball away. Plays a little bit of receiver in high school too. But to me, he's just kind of your solid, long, developmental boundary corner at 6'3", 190.
What do you think about his potential to play safety, David? Because I think that's where Miami is kind of curious about him, is to see if that's a position that maybe he could transition to. I'm not sure how you feel like he could
I
potentially
would
make that
prefer him
transition.
there. Like, I don't
Yeah,
think he is a corner, like
yeah,
ideally. But like, is there much? I mean, it is a projection because you're not seeing it much on his tape.
yeah.
But body type wise, yes, he definitely check. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, I think it makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's where he's kind of considered as far as far, again, listed as a cornerback. I think Miami views him as more of a safety. And I think truly, I think this is a very evaluational, I'm not sure if that's a word, type of visit. Like Miami hasn't, I don't think Miami's seen this kid.
Yeah.
They just offered him, I think probably at this point, it's maybe been 10 days since they've offered him, if that, and quickly pivoted to an official visit. I don't even know if they got up to see him in the spring or at any point if they got eyes on him. Maybe they did, and maybe they just finally, as a collective, maybe decided to offer him. But I think that this is going to be this is going to be a sort of evaluation point for Miami, for Kosi. I guess maybe it's Kosi or Koski. I'm not really sure. Um, but yeah, I think in general, I think there's just going to be maybe some questions that need answers, and maybe we'll kind of see where things are at coming out of it. Similar to maybe to Marion Watkins from
Yeah.
the first official visit week, and Miami just wanted to kind of get him on campus. They liked what they saw, but I think that there's still a lot that both parties needed to learn about one another. So we'll kind of get the vibes about where things are at coming out of it.
Let's wrap things up with three-star linebacker Justin Edwards, 89 grade, 6'1", 205, Rutgers commit. Finished his junior season with 52 tackles, 15 tackles for loss, 10 sacks. One of the top linebackers in state here this cycle. Tell us what we need to know here about Justin Edwards.
Yeah, I think this is probably Miami's favorite in-state linebacker. Justin Edwards is a guy that they got on campus this spring, and they offered after kind of just sizing him up and seeing him in person. He does have, I think, just a solid linebacker frame, especially when you kind of consider the rest of the in-state guys. I think Justin Edwards is definitely an intriguing athlete. I know Andrew Ivins has kind of threw out some, what is it, Jamie and Win. What's this guy's name? The Jamie Sherfield who went to Auburn, or Jamie
Okay.
Sherwood that went to
Yeah, yeah.
Auburn. He's thrown out some of those comparisons. So I mean, if that's what he ends up being, that's a win because he got drafted and he, played in the NFL. So I think that this is an intriguing guy for sure. And I know again internally they're super excited about Justin Edwards. Just committed to Rutgers. So he committed to Rutgers on the 8th. It is currently the 13th. So he's been committed to Rutgers for less than a week. So we'll see if Mario Cristobal and Corey Heatherman could potentially pull a fast one on, I think, a mentor to both of those guys in Greg Schiano. So we'll see where things are at with Justin Edwards coming out of the weekend.
All right, let's get out of here on this note. I ask you this in all our preview pods, but if I'm pinning you down and you got to give me three guys Miami fans should, invest time in following and caring about, how this official visit weekend goes and the outcome of things on, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Who are the three guys this weekend you would highlight?
Yeah, I would go Calvin Russell for sure. Just what the vibes are coming out of the weekend for the 5 star. I would go Israel Briggs, potential commit watch. Can Miami kind of close the door on that recruitment after kind of, I think, to me, setting the pace for a little bit. And Blake Stewart, another one that I think is just extremely valued internally. I think that he's one that is probably going to have an idea of what he wants to do. Maybe he still takes that Michigan visit. But I think in his mind, Clemson and Miami having the context of both of those, maybe there's a chance that he decides to move forward with a decision. So I think those are the three that I would bring to the table. I'm also very curious about Tyron Evans and to see where
Yeah.
things are at with Miami and that recruitment.
All right. Good stuff as always from Gabby. Again, stay locked on to InsideTheU.com. Recruiting never stops in the month of June. Another official visit weekend coming up. And appreciate everyone for listening. Check us out on YouTube if you want to watch us talk about these things at the InsideTheU.com YouTube channel. And until next time, take care.